We're glad you could join us on another episode of Business Redefined, your weekly, most comprehensive look at the world of business, finance, and economics. This week, last week, the previous week, we've been quite heavy on matters regarding the finance bill, and that's because we are getting neck deep into the budget cycle for FY 2024-25. And tonight, today actually, was the sunset date for submission of comments on memoranda on matters regarding the finance bill and its proposals, and therefore public hearings begun. Now, first on set was the Institute of Economic Affairs, and we are privileged and delighted to have the Chief Executive Officer, not the chairperson, that is Mr. Kwame Owino. Kwame, asante sana for your time.
Thank you, thanks.
Kwame, I followed through your presentation.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that legislators always throw at me, especially the chairman of the Finance and Planning Committee, is that you're very good at attacking our proposals in the finance bill. You tell us remove this, remove that, remove X, Y, you know. You never give us alternatives. Yeah. And yet, you know, we have revenue obligations, especially in FY 24-25. The target for ordinary revenue alone is 2.9 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Kwame, did you give any alternatives?
No, because that's not... So let's start with the fact that we come from the Institute of Economic Affairs. And we know that the average income in this country is just something slightly more than 240,000 shillings per person per year. That's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it means that Kenyans live on very tight budgets. For that reason, if people are opposed or rather say that this tax will be onerous, what they're saying is cut your cloth.
Yeah.
As well. So our intention as we went in there, for instance, the very first comment we made, which of course was feedback, was basically the 2.5% taxation motor vehicle tax per year, right? And the argument is, maybe some of us here own vehicles or we don't. Regardless, we are not telling you not to tax us and do another thing. This is just bad for economic performance. That's it. So if it means that you have to make a corresponding cut somewhere else, you need to, because I think we have to be careful as citizens not to be trapped in the idea that spending is a given. We must spend 4 trillion. Yeah. So now if you tell us that you don't want to pay taxes for bread, then tell us, are we going to tax wheelbarrows? Yes. No, that's not the compact. The idea is your tax appetite is too large, suggesting that your appetite for spending is too large. I think you need to cut that appropriately. So that's all a citizen owes members of parliament. They shouldn't ask us to do their work for them, no.
I like that comment. So now, speaking about the matters regarding the motor vehicle circulation tax, finance bill by design was very heavy on indirect taxes. Yeah. And we had seen a preemption of this in the medium-term revenue strategy, indicating there'll be an aggressive cleanup on VAT, exemptions, zero rating, etc. And many have asked whether, do we really have a good finance bill if it goes heavy on indirect taxes? Of course, indirect taxes reach even the bottom of the pyramid, unlike finance bill last year, which was heavy on the income and direct taxes.
No, we don't. I actually think that the very idea that you need a finance bill with, in our account, and perhaps because we added it up all together, almost close to 200 different propositions around one tax here, one administrative effect here and there, tells you that we are creating a fine mess and calling it a tax policy. It's going to be completely incoherent and all that. I understand the cleanups that need to be made. If obviously the wrong HS code was referred to last year, then obviously you need to fix it up, everything else. But if you had a tax, so for instance, one of the big ones was the taxation VAT remission. So VAT remission, on the expansion of recreational facilities or a hospital of 50 beds and below last year. And then it's being reversed this year. And some people made investments based on last year's. That inconsistency tells you we don't have a tax system. And a tax system doesn't chase anything except for today's revenues. And that in itself is a problem. So no, I think Kenya would do well if we just cancel the tax policy, the finance bill that we had today and waited for another 5 years. There'll be growth. On the basis of that growth, revenues will grow, and government should live off those revenues.
Kwame, before this finance bill, we saw the medium-term revenue strategy, which thankfully even had an implementation matrix in terms of what we should have expected in Finance Bill 24. Yeah. We saw the draft national tax policy, at least with 2 iterations, which went to Parliament. Yeah. Do you feel that there is coherence between those 2 documents and the finance bill?
No. So for instance, one of the things that the tax bill says is, rather the strategy, the policy says is that government will try as much as possible every time a tax change occurs to rid from the responses of the market to make an assessment, a kind of evaluation before you propose any change. So we had stuff that was proposed last year, Parliament rejected, but is brought back this year. There was stuff that was changed last year and is being changed, that was changed last year and is being reversed today. So that in itself tells us that even the very basic commitment to a policy on how to structure taxes has been abandoned as soon as it was taken to Parliament. And what we are doing right now is an aggressive race to collect as much money as can be collected for now, regardless of what it does to future businesses and taxes. And what it does to future businesses, or of course potential for collecting higher taxes.
And looking at the macro context within this, so before the president left for his trip to Washington, D.C., we went for a press briefing, and I asked the PS for Foreign Affairs. The seventh review with the IMF program has been ongoing for 6 weeks plus, unusually long.
Yeah.
And the question here is, what are the sticky issues? And he raised one of them, tax. We have been failing to meet our revenue targets, according to the IMF program, and that's one of the sticky issues. When you look at it within that context, and it has been said that is why Finance Bill 2024 is really aggressive, do you think there should be an understanding of the context within which the state is operating?
Okay, let me say two things about that. There's something to be said for the fiscal deficit, or rather the primary deficit, which is the difference in how much government collects, how much it pays in interest, and the gap between tax collections and how much is spent. I think Kenya's, given the conditions of the economy today, Kenya's targets in terms of the primary deficit is too tight. It's too tight. It's too tight. Whether that's the IMF's fault or the government's fault, I'm not too sure. But this was a negotiated agreement. So I think both of them need to say we assessed it wrong. And possibly opening up that. That I accept. What I don't accept is people who are in office because this is a sovereign telling us that we are being dictated to by the IMF, which funds less than 3% of the entire budget. That's not acceptable to me. So I think that's become a convenient scapegoat to not do the important things that you do, that need to be done. And I personally, we at the Institute of Economic Affairs do not accept as a reason that the IMF is imposing upon us these rules, and if we do not, something really bad is going to happen to us. I don't think so.
I see. Interesting take there, Kwame. You were very passionate about the removal of bread, supply of ordinary bread from the second schedule of the VAT Act, which means it will cease being VAT zero rated. It will be standard rated. Just give us more context into that.
All right. So this is it. Let's start with the facts. I think policy and taxation policy, I was trying to remind members of parliament, and of course, as we prepared for this, my colleagues told me, if you forget anything else, please let members of parliament understand who elected them. Not in the political sense, how Kenyans live. Now, looking at the CPI, and if you look at the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey, it tells you that 22% of Kenyan children below the age of 5 are stunted. Stuntedness is that medical condition, if I may call it, which means physiologically a child has not had nutrition for 2-3 years that allows him to grow and match his weight, his height, for his age. So we are living in a country in which 1 in 5 children is basically starving, receiving insufficient nutrition. And here you are raising VAT and other taxes on food items and including bread. So I think in our view, it's not just bad economics, it's immoral and sad. And I wanted to remind them to understand that revenues must be chased, but you cannot raise revenues by taking bread off the mouths of kids. That's not acceptable.
In case you like this show and you enjoy watching it and the content we put out, please text Business Redefined to 20686. Business Redefined to 20686, and we shall be able to sample some of your thoughts and also just keep track of what you would like us to continue bringing onto this platform. Before that, kicking swiftly from that, Kwame, before the break we were discussing the issues of standard rating VAT on bread. Let's talk about, this country has talked about the question about income tax. And one of the issues which has emerged and even came in the MTRS was the view that we need to restructure our pay-as-you-earn bands to ensure that we have a more equitable structure. I was surprised IEA didn't have this in its proposal.
Well, last year when the two new bands, the 32.5% and 35% bands were introduced, the IEA conducted a simulation which told us that leaving aside the fact that the raising the top band from 30 to 32.5 and then 35%, given the number of people in those income bands, it's not going to raise substantial new money.
Yeah.
It's just going to raise administrative costs for businesses that have to comply. Our view is that a flat tax for anybody who wants more than 60,000 shillings at 22.5 would raise more money, but not just raise more money because that's not important, but provide a stability and a predictability which would actually, in our view, raise less than 50% of the complaints that people have on account of late payment of taxes and that's it. Yeah. So a simplified tax system which performs that role, and obviously income taxes, especially personal income taxes, are the main pillar of revenues in Kenya.
Yes.
So you flatten it, spread it as much as is possible, and then you can redistribute through services, public services the government requires, or any other form of transfers. Simplified and very, very easy to calculate. Instead, we have a tax system that's based on making successful people feel guilty for their success by making it look, why should somebody take 1 million shillings home? Yeah. They need it. They have to buy the car for you to tax next year, for instance. So anyway, jokes aside, but the point is, we understand the pressure for revenues, but an inordinately complex taxation system is something that we think is not good for Kenya's taxation. And if the revenues and the certainty of the revenues are what is required, you can capture substantial revenue from a simple flat tax that reduces complexity.
Kwame, allow me to differ with you. When you talk about a flat tax, 22.5% for anyone earning 60,000 shillings and above, one of the issues which often emerges around flat taxes is the question of how progressive they are. Yeah. And because ideally we have always held the view that tax should be progressive. Yeah, you earn more, you should be remitting more. Yes. How will you address that challenge when it comes to this proposal, especially because one of the challenges we have with the present payee bands is that the 30% kicks in too early?
Precisely.
Yes.
Now, I think it's very strange logic when I hear people say that a flat tax does not account for people who earn more paying more. So let's just talk about it here. If you earn 20,000 shillings, 100,000 shillings on a flat tax of 22.5, 22,500 would go to government. If you earned 50,000, it would be half of that, which means you pay proportionate to how much you earn. So you're giving away, let me say that, or your obligation is dependent exactly on how far you are from the margin. So it's very easy for us to administer, but you always almost know that everybody who earns a certain amount pays the same amount without any reliefs here or there and all that. So it's the simplicity. So unless people have this idea that that's the final, the higher up you go from an arbitrary line, you should pay a higher percentage of your income. Maybe that's where progressivity comes in. But progressivity introduces complexity, and I call it envy, where you envy people for the fact that they earn 20 shillings more than you, and you believe on that 20 shillings they should pay 30% while you pay 20%. I don't think that it's useful. So let's remind ourselves that one of the primary functions of taxation is for government to receive money to pay for services. At the same time, do not make it inordinately onerous for people to actually calculate their taxes and make that payment. But it's not true that if you have a flat tax, people who have higher incomes actually have an easy ride. They actually still give a substantially higher portion, the same amount of their income as the obligation, as their tax obligation.
I have a different proposition for you, and closing that conversation very quickly. Why not lower the income tax rates, both pay and corporate income tax rates? Because after all, that's what is in the MTRS, the medium-term revenue strategy, and bump up VAT, 18%, for instance.
I don't know that bumping up VAT. So first, one of the things that I think about VAT is, again, as the Institute of Economic Affairs, we think that a major challenge for Kenya's taxation today, especially one that creates coherence, is its complexity. Kenya's tax system is far too complex. And VAT is one of the most complex taxes, both in terms of adherence to and getting government to actually predict how much revenue would come in. So I disagree that raising VAT would be useful. There are countries in the region whose VAT is at that level that you speak about, but Kenya still collects much, much more money, even on a per capita basis, from VAT than all those other countries. So the point is not about raising it. But this country could benefit quite a lot, especially if parliamentarians took this seriously and reduced the tax rate. Our tax rates are too high at all levels, whether it's a corporate tax or whether it's the individual income tax, relative to Kenya's peers, countries that grow much, much faster than we, but are in our same band. Obviously, it tells you that high taxation is not necessarily good for growth.
The eco levy.
Yes.
What is IEA's perspective?
Well, we are surprised that the eco levy is even applied so liberally to items that are supposed to meet that green, right? Yes. So this is what the incoherence is. I don't know why you would apply eco levy to specific items, some of which are intended to meet the very purpose of reducing carbon. So again, it tells you something just like VAT, but I mean excise tax. It's just slapped on anything now because all that is happening here, taxation policy in Kenya is only about chasing revenue, and chasing revenue only for the moment. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Really, really bad way for government planning.
25% excise duty on edible oil is another thing which really emerged from your presentation. Yes. And you spoke again very passionately about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the same reason. If you have a country in which, as I tell you, kids are stunted, a major driver of inflation in Kenya is food prices, of which cooking oil and especially vegetable oil is a huge part of it. And the third part is that tax, applying an excise tax on food is not only a misapplication of the principle of excise taxation, but at the same time, 25% was so high because it's unprecedented. Other countries do. Yes, there are countries that have a tax on edible oil, and most of them are actually at half of that rate, 10%, some have it at 8%. So it's not just that the tax doesn't make sense, but even its rate is far too high for whatever it is that government wishes to approve, to achieve.
One of the key issues which stood out in this finance bill are the changes proposed in the Tax Procedures Act. Yeah. And one of them being that failure to comply with the e-Teams integration will attract a penalty of 2 million per month. Yeah. What were IEA's thoughts on this?
Well, it didn't appear in the brief, but we have in a bigger brief, which is this.
I noticed it wasn't there.
Yes, it wasn't there. So this is it. The proposal, obviously, it's a proposal that any person or trader who fails to integrate into e-Teams in order to generate invoices, for failing to do that, the penalty with 2 million shillings per month. Yeah. Now, very few traders generate invoices even worth 2 million shillings per month. So again, this tells you about this scarecrow approach that Kenya's taxation policy is, which is to be extremely punitive, scaring people. So imagine if this was a small trader or a trader of any size, and their first obligation in terms of taxation would be less than, say, 100,000 shillings. Yeah. But they've attracted 20 times as much in a tax obligation. They will never comply.
Yes.
So I think it's bad design of scaring people with a sledgehammer approach when actually trying to ensure compliance and to give people, even when they have a mishap takes place and they haven't complied, make it easy for them to not think that you're going to shut them down. Yeah. I think this doesn't even make it, it doesn't look good on the part of Parliament, and obviously give KRA the profile of a caring tax collector that they've been trying to cultivate over the last few years.
Kwame, we have 2 minutes to go, and let's close with this. At the end of your submission, you had what I would call an exchange with the chairman of the Finance and Planning Committee, and your argument was, show us that making these submissions before you has value. Yeah. You seem to be a skeptic of these processes.
Not really. The point is this. I think that if government is going to, or rather if Parliament, which has responsibility for passing taxes, is going to have a tax bill every year that has close to 200 different prescriptions in different tax areas, right? Rushing people through one morning or 2 days suggests to us that we are not giving careful review to every item in there. So that's the point. And then secondly, given public engagement last year around the finance bill for 2023, the general feeling of the public was that Parliament, and especially the committee, treated proposals as a fait accompli, in the sense that, look, this proposal has been brought to us. If we do not pass it, we've been given the impression that the earth may crack. So we will listen to you for the purposes of politeness, but we will pass whatever we want to. And I was asking Parliament to be careful about not making Kenyans cynical of the fact that public processes, some of them underpinned by the Constitution, mean nothing.
Okay. Yep. Kwame, we have been fleshing out their submission on matters regarding the finance bill of 2024, a raft of issues, whether it is direct taxes, indirect taxes, and of course, I've done a summary on some of the key presentations which came today on my Twitter handle at AmbokoJH. Remember, if you're enjoying and like this show, please text Business We Define to 20686. That is Business We Define to 20686. That will enable us to interact with you a lot better and be sure to bring you the sort of content which you would enjoy to have as part of your conversation. We shall continue focusing on the finance bill. Remember, we are right at the heart of the budget cycle for FY 24-25. So until the end of June, this will be the order of the business. So stay with us. Stay tuned.